Welcome back to Beginner Woodworker, everybody. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name's Matt, and this channel is really all about me going from essentially zero experience in woodworking to seeing how long it would take me to get to a point where I could essentially call myself a professional woodworker. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then you should definitely subscribe and follow me along that journey. So for today's video, I ordered this really beautiful slab of walnut, which initially I wanted to make a dining table out of, but I could not find a layout that I liked, so I decided to make two tables in the end, a small side table and a coffee table. So for those of you who've been following me for a bit longer, this was my old and very cheap router. I had loads of issues flattening my slabs, took me hours and hours, so spent a bit of money, upgraded my router and my router bit, and wow, it was so worth the money. The results were so much better and it was so much easier to use. And by the way, if you're keen on building that router sled, it's super easy and there's a link to that down below. So of course, after flattening my slabs, I came across all of these bug holes, loads of cracks. So that's something I will have to deal with, just no idea yet what I'm going to do about it. So when making epoxy tables, there's lots of time consuming steps, especially cleaning up your slabs. This is really important because you need to make sure that the epoxy is going to bind well to the wood. And also for the smaller table, I'm going to use a clear epoxy. You're going to see right through that. So I really needed to make sure that this was super clean. And also make sure you tie your shoelaces. So with my slabs all cleaned up and cut down to size, it was time to make the melamine forms and get ready for the epoxy pour. Alright guys, so I thought everything was going a little bit too smoothly and we've run into our first mistake. I was almost done making the melamine form, which by the way is a real pain in the ass, but I forgot to account for the thickness of the edges.
Freaking idiot!
So that means I'm gonna have to reorder all of this melamine and then start again. So I finally got the melamine forms done. Not gonna lie, it was pretty frustrating having to wait an extra 2 weeks for that to arrive, spend an extra $100, but that's just how it goes with woodworking, you know? You're gonna make mistakes and you just have to deal with it, but luckily the wood fit in perfectly. So with everything back on track and looking good, it was time to mix up the epoxy, pop those bubbles, and do my first pour. So I'd set up everything really well this time, learned from some previous mistakes, and yeah, started off really well, was feeling really confident. Yeah. So the epoxy pretty much immediately started spilling out of two sides, so at this point I'm just frantically trying to block those holes. Honestly guys, the amount of preparation I did this time, and look, I mean, like everything is a mess. This stuff is dripping. I used a whole tub of flex paste. Oh, I don't really know what to do. These gloves, I think I got a size too small. Oh, guys. This stuff is a real test of patience. And it's really testing mine right now. So I decided just to do away with the gloves and spent the next 2 hours using a mix of caulk, tape, and flex paste. Finally got those holes plugged, and then it was time to move on to the next table, which is twice as much epoxy, and this time all in black. Alright guys, so I'm about to pour this 8-liter jug of epoxy into the big table. I'm not gonna lie, I'm super nervous. If this spills, it's gonna be a long day. So wish me luck, guys. So it took me about 15 or 20 minutes to work up the courage to do the second pour, and I did put about 5 layers of caulk around the outside just to be sure. Alright guys, we have good news and bad news. The good news is there was no leak and this table is looking very, very cool. The bad news is I horribly miscalculated how much epoxy I need. I still have half a bucket left, so that is a lot of money to waste, and I'm not sure how I can salvage it. So long story short, I was not able to salvage it, and after a few days, everything cured and it was time to remove the tables from the molds. So as you could see and probably hear there, that was pretty tough to get those out of the molds, but it went really well, so I'm not going to complain. So it was time to go back over to my brand new router and re-flatten the slabs and get them ready for the next step. So once I have my tables all nice and flat, it was time to square up the sides and then round off all the edges. And at this point, they're really starting to take shape and look like proper tables. So this is where the real painstaking work comes into place. There's a lot of chip out that comes from flattening your slabs with a router. There's lots of little holes, little dips, lots of things that you need to start to fill in. So I use a bit of epoxy to fill in the bigger holes and then just start going around with a sander, scraping it down and just repeating this process again and again until I have a pretty smooth surface. So once you've gone through this process many times, lots of little holes start to show up. So for the smaller holes, I use a CA glue with an activator spray that cures within about 5 or 10 seconds, and then just start sanding and repeating the process. So the one thing I've definitely noticed about making epoxy tables is the real difference in quality and the way your table looks is how much attention to detail and how much time you put in with filling in all those holes, sanding, and just repeating that process. And it can take days and days and get frustrating at one point. So I'm still learning that, and hopefully I'll keep improving. So my parents had this old glass table with a really beautiful base, which was perfect for my smaller side table. So I had to smash the glass to get these metal pieces off of it, and then basically use sandpaper, chisels, and some nail polish remover to get that extra glass off the top. Then they were ready to put back onto the table, and I could finally mount my table to that base. So I was able to fix all those cracks I showed you earlier by filling them in with a black epoxy, which I think looks great. But all of these holes, I tried to fill them in with some black epoxy as well. I thought it would look cool. I think it does not look good at all. Plus it took me weeks of just going over again and again, filling in all of those tiny holes. There were so many of them, but I finally got it done and I was ready to add the finish. So after all of that hard work, I was so happy to finally be able to apply the finish. This is definitely the most satisfying part of doing these projects. Adding the finish, buffing it all in, and just seeing all of those colors come to life and pop, and you really get an idea of what that table is finally going to look like. So the last step was just to add the legs, and I'd finally be done. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please do let me know down in the comments below what you think of the video, of the final products. I'm pretty happy with them in the end, but I still feel like there's room for improvement and I'm not super satisfied. So I am very excited about getting the next one done and continuing to see more progress and improvement. Thanks again, guys.